All right, let's get started. This week, we have a new thinker, Zhuangzi, who is my favorite thinker, actually, in early China. Yeah, I remember my senior thesis when I was graduating from Nanjing University in China. I wrote a paper on Zhuangzi, and I tried to contextualize his philosophy back into the historical backgrounds of the Warring States period. Okay, so let's get to it. But before we move on to Zhuangzi, the person or the persons and the text, because again, just like Lao Tzu Dao De Jing, it's been argued that the authorship for the text Zhuangzi could be plural, could be multiple. I mean, there could be multiple authors for this text we today call Zhuangzi. But maybe some chapters, especially the early chapters, are perhaps authored by Zhuangzi himself. But later chapters probably authored by some followers of Zhuangzi, like Zhuangzi's disciples. Okay, so there's still a lot of we don't know about this text and Zhuangzi the person. But before we move on to the text and the person of Zhuangzi, let's talk a little bit about Taoism in general. Last time we talked about how the concept of Taoism was a later invention by historians to make sense of early historical phenomena and the textual traditions. But there are other thinkers or intellectual trends that have been inspired by what we call Taoism today, especially Lao Tzu Dao De Jing. For example, natural science. Okay, I want to talk a little bit about natural science. See, science has been generally considered as a Western tradition, right? Many scholars argue that there is no scientific tradition in China, but some other scholars disagree. Okay. For example, some scholars have argued that there is a very strong tradition of science and technology in China. It's just the Chinese scientific tradition focus more on application of the knowledge, of the scientific knowledge about the world, about the nature world, right? About the cosmos. But the Greek, compared to the ancient Greek tradition, which sort of argues for an interest of knowledge for the sake of knowledge. Okay, the Chinese tradition focused more on application and implementation of the knowledge. Actually, of course, the Chinese are pretty good at technological advancement, right? We know that before the modern period, some of the major technological breakthroughs happened in China. For example, the invention of gunpowder, very, very important. Okay, gunpowder came into being in China, I mean, later than this time we're looking at. Gunpowder probably came into being, was invented around between like Tang and Song period. It was firearms. Chinese were the first to make firearms in history and it came into being around 11th century, and then 1 or 2 centuries later, the Mongols learned about the technology of gunpowder. And then when the Mongols invaded, expanded westward into West Asia, into Russia, into East Europe, and eventually into Middle East, the Mongols brought Chinese technicians with them. And then thus the technology of gunpowder got spread to the West. And once medieval Europe learned about the technology of gunpowder, they started to make cannons, which destroyed all those castles in Middle Ages Europe. And that ended the feudalism in Europe. So the introduction or the importation of gunpowder into Europe from China by Europeans played a very major role for Europe's entrance into the modern era. I think it's safe to argue that. And who invented gunpowder? The Chinese Taoists. The Chinese Taoists invented gunpowder. Okay, when we talk about Taoists or Taoism, generally we're talking about two groups of people. In early China, we're talking about before the Han Dynasty, before the Qing and the Han Dynasty. There was no such religion called Taoism. Those Taoists are basically philosophers, thinkers, like Lao Tzu or Zhuangzi or people like them. Okay, sometimes they may gather together, have a debate, have a discussion. They may travel around in the mountains, wandering, hiking together. But there is no such thing like a religion that we call Taoism in early China. Okay, the kind of concept of I'm talking about the religious Taoism here. What we mean by the religious Taoism came into being in late Han period, around 200 AD. So that's hundreds of years later than Orestes period. And first, the religious Taoists, they got together, and then eventually they learned the institutional setting from Buddhism. So they built up their own Taoist monasteries. They try to use meditation, martial arts, all these different techniques to cultivate themselves. And then they also try to make elixir. Religious Taoists, they try to make elixir, but we have to differentiate philosophical Taoism and the religious Taoism. Okay, philosophical Taoism are basically accommodated by those people like Zhuangzi or Lao Tzu. Okay, they're basically thinkers, intellectuals, okay, philosophers or scholars. They're not interested in going to a monastery to really meditate or get an elixir. Okay, they're not interested in that. They're basically interested in philosophy, like, what is language? What's the problem of language? What is the problem of civilization, right? We call this group of people philosophical Taoism, okay? But later in China, there have been this new type of a Taoist called religious Taoism, right? For example, today in China, there's a place called, in Hubei province, there's a mountain called Wudang Mountain. Some of you probably watched some martial arts movies about Wudang Taoists, right? So these people, these religious Taoists, they practice Taoism as a religion, just like Buddhists practice Buddhism, okay? And the Taoists, the religious Taoists, they're like this, okay? They practice martial arts, they practice meditation, they live in the remote mountain, sometimes in the cave, just like Buddhists. They try to, meditate, and they read the Lao Tzu Tao Te Ching, and they read the Zhuangzi from a religious perspective, okay? From a religious perspective. For example, some of the Taoists believe that chanting or memorizing, reading Lao Tzu Tao Te Ching will help them into this almost like, a sort of a meditating kind of a mental state. Okay, it's good for their mental health, and it also definitely lifts their spiritual enlightenment. Okay, so that's, and also they sometimes practice martial art as well. Yeah, like the Taoists in Wudang Mountain. These are the Taoists in Wudang Mountain. Okay, and then they practice Tai Chi. The Chinese Tai Chi. It's a very, very slow kind of body practice, right? I would like to show you some of the Tai Chi moves. Okay, let me show you some of the Tai Chi. Everybody can see me. Everybody can see me. Can you guys see me when I move away from the cam? Okay, so Tai Chi is like this. Okay, it's a typical Taoist. So later it got emerged into Taoist, physical cultivation tradition. And you stand there very, very slowly, and then you imagine there is a primal energy that you're holding, or the primal energy is going through some channels, imagine channels around your body, and then you very, 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 very slowly move your body like this, okay, like this, and then so you do movements like this, okay. It's very good for senior citizens, okay. All right, so that's a religious Taoism. In 200 AD. Towards the late Han, towards the end of the late Han period, some religious Taoists they used the earlier philosophical Taoism, like Tao Te Ching and the text of Zhuangzi, to organize themselves. They also invented some new texts, allegedly authored by Lao Tzu as well. So Lao Tzu has been this legendary immortal or the inaugurator or originator, initiator of Taoism. Around 280, some of the Taoists, they gathered together, created this new popular religion, and they formed their own government. Okay, they launched a rebellion. This is called a Yellow Turban Rebellion around the 280. And the Han Dynasty, we're talking about the Second Empire in Chinese history, was almost overturned by the Yellow Turban Taoists. They're all Taoists, and they believe that if you chant some kind of a mantra, and if you perform some kind of ritual, for example, if you draw some kind of a specific graphs and burning down and eat up the remains or ashes of the remains, then you could get some magical power. So there's a lot of I don't know, shamanism involved in religious Taoism. Okay, there are a lot of rituals, ceremonies that involves, for example, calling some spirits to help you, to make you stronger, or making elixir. Making elixir is also a very strong Taoist tradition. Starting from the Han Dynasty, a lot of religious Taoists, they try to find elixir. Okay, a lot of times they put all these minerals, mercury. Mercury is poisonous, but ancient Chinese actually did not know that. They put all these minerals, chemicals together, put into a furnace, and then melt it down and burn it for like 49 days, sometimes 49 days, 81 days, until they get some kind of a product. And some Taoists would call it elixir. And by accident, some Taoists, when they put some chemicals together, boom, they got an explosion. And then some Taoists realize that, hey, this is a controllable explosion. Okay, you can actually repeat the process. If you put some specific chemicals together, you get a controllable explosion. And that's how gunpowder was invented by religious Taoists. So we're talking about the scientific tradition of China. Of course, there are many inventions, like a mariner's compass, right? Chinese invented mariner's compass. And then also during the Han Dynasty, Chinese also invented their own paper. Okay, Chinese invented the paper independently, using fabric, wood, right? Yeah, wood pulp, basically. It's the same technology as the West, okay? But much earlier. And then there are also many other inventions. But now today we're focusing on the Taoist influence on Chinese scientific tradition. So gunpowder is just one example. I want to tell you that Taoism is strongly closely linked to China's scientific tradition. And some other Taoists, they also interested in scientific questions like, how is the universe came into being? How was it created? For example, some Taoists believe that maybe water is the fundamental element that creates the universe. I mean, this is some primitive speculation of how universe came into being in the first place. So cosmology, Taoism cosmology was a very important branch of what we call today Taoism, but we don't have a lot of time to talk about that. Techniques of a physical self-cultivation. Okay, martial art is also closely linked to what we call Taoism. Later, when Buddhism came to China, of course, Chinese gave Buddhism a new meaning by associating martial art, which is one kind of physical self-cultivation, into Buddhism. What's interesting here is that if you look at the origin region of Buddhism, which is India, northern India, you don't see any martial art tradition associated with Buddhism. Only in China, you see that Chinese try to associate martial art with Buddhism. And the result is the Shaolin tradition. Anybody have watched any Shaolin movie? All these Shaolin Buddhist monks, they always practice martial art, right? Well, they're just like a Wudang Taoists. Yeah, they practice martial art as a way of physical self-cultivation to lift their religious enlightenment. Okay, and then the Taoists, they also try to understand how body works. So this is how the East Asian acupuncture tradition came into being. So all these traditions are actually can be traced back to early China. For example, the Taoists, they believe that not just the Taoists, a lot of so-called 方士, the Chinese term is 方士, that means a specialist, technological specialist, that believe that there are a lot of channels around all human body. Everybody can see my screen. Okay, so I'm showing you how to do acupuncture. Okay, maybe your acupuncture therapy is covered by your healthcare insurance. I don't know. But doesn't hurt to check. Next time, remember to call your healthcare provider whether it's covered. So Taoists believe that the whole human body has all these channels that we cannot see, but they're still there. Okay, one way to adjust all these channels. All these channels is to have your primal energy, the qi, to flow better around your body. One way to adjust them is to have this small needle, okay, to put into some invisible holes around your body, okay? And those holes would just work as like a valves, okay? And when you put this small needle, very tiny small needle, into those holes, you can adjust the primal energy that goes through the channel around your body. See how many channels are there? There are many and many of them, right? Yeah. And then through experience, some Taoist medical experts, specialists, they believe that some channels are related to some of your physical problems like headache or heart, some organs like a heart. You know, if you have a heart problem, then you're gonna have to put the needles to adjust the primal energy that flows through some specific channels around your body. Okay, it's a very specific knowledge about medicine, and then the Taoist medical specialists believe that the way human body functions corresponds to how the universe or cosmos functions. So this is called 天人合一. Heaven, the way heaven or cosmos functions, and the way your human body works, there are a lot of overlaps. Okay, so in other words, this is all based on this emulation of nature concept. The Chinese traditional medicine is heavily draws upon Taoist philosophy. So if you want to understand Chinese medicine tradition, medical tradition, you have to understand Taoism and Tao Te Ching especially. Okay. So that's the physical self-cultivation tradition, okay, which includes martial art, which includes meditation, also acupuncture, and some other understandings of your body. You know, in the 11th to 12th century, during the Song Dynasty, we're talking about AD, 12th century, 11th century AD. The Medical Academy, created and sponsored by the imperial government, has many departments. Okay, one department is acupuncture. Okay, so we have this human body model passed on from the Song Dynasty. Okay, and this model is made of bronze. And is hollow inside. And on the surface, you would see all these holes around the body. Okay, and these holes are where the 穴位 or 穴道 are, the so-called primary energy holes are. And a medical student is going to study the position of all these holes, the accurate positions of those holes, and he's going to memorize them using many years. Okay, he try to understand them, associate them with the different diseases, and also know how to use your needle to do acupuncture on those holes. On the examination day, this is what's interesting. On the examination day, if you want to graduate from the Medical Academy of China, you have to pass a test. On the test day, this bronze statue is put out. Okay, but all these positions of the holes are going to be covered up, so you don't see them. Okay, and remember, this bronze statue is hollow inside, right? So they put water. The professors would have put water, fill water into the whole body of this bronze statue, and then those holes are actually empty. So, but those holes, empty holes, are filled with wax, but you cannot tell which position has the hole. You have to totally rely on your memory. Okay. And then on the day of exam, the professor would say, hey, put your needle into this hole called Bai Hui or Dantian, whatever. I mean, all these names are the names of the holes. There are hundreds of them. And the student is going to put the needle and then try just once, stick that into that hole. If he put the needle in the right position, then the needle would pierce through the wax. Okay. And then when he pulled out the needle, water should come out, right? But if he doesn't memorize, if he hasn't memorized the right position of the hole, then he would have put his needle on the wrong place. In that case, his needle would not pierce through the surface. No water will come out. Thus, he failed. There's a very rigorous training and a very rigorous examination. So this is a sort of a Taoist tradition influenced Chinese medicine. All right, so what's next? Okay, yeah. Now Zhuangzi. Zhuangzi, in my opinion, is another sort of a later branch of Laozi's original Taoism. Okay, but Zhuangzi focused more on philosophical aspect of Taoism. Okay, and we're going to talk about the Zhuangzi in detail later. Han Feizi, another thinker that came out in later Warren's period, he is generally considered as a legalist thinker because of his the similarity of his thought to Lord of Shang. But this legalist thinker who is interested in inventing or formulating a philosophy of rulers, Han Feizi is also very interested in Taoism. So in later Warren's period, we see this phenomena. I call this syncretic approach to earlier traditions. Later Warren's period thinkers, they try to sort of learn a little bit from everybody. Okay, they learn a little bit from Confucianism, they learn a little bit from Taoism, and then learn a little bit from Moism, and they put everything together. Okay, to form their own unique teachings. Han Feizi is just like that. Okay, so although he's mainly interested in governance, but he does learn a lot from Laozi. Actually, Han Feizi has he authored 2 chapters to interpret Laozi. So to a certain degree, Han Feizi certainly was influenced by earlier Taoism, but he only took the part from Taoism that is about governance. Remember, in Laozi's Tao Te Ching, there are some passages about governance, right? In some of the passages, Laozi argues that, hey, governing a huge country should be like frying a small fish. Yeah, he just says that. Actually, very few people actually know what he really means. How come governing a big country is like frying a small fish? So, I mean, you can use your imagination to interpret that. But this is what Laozi says in one of the chapters in Tao Te Ching. And then Han Feizi would interpret that, okay, saying, hey, this is to show you, I mean, this is Han Feizi's opinion. Han Feizi would interpret that this shows that you want to have a small government, okay? Even when you're running a big empire, you want to keep the government efficient and small, okay? You don't want to expand your government to such a degree that your physical capabilities cannot handle, okay? Well, Adam Smith and the libertarian Western economists certainly would agree with that. Last time we talked about that, right? So this is just an example of how Taoism had an influence on political philosophies. All right. Yeah, and then there are also later political philosophies that further developed the Laozi's original teaching, like the Huang Lao school. We don't have time to talk about this particular school, but I just want to mention it very quickly. In early Han period, there is another branch to interpret Laozi's teaching. and they call themselves Huang Lao school. Huang Lao means Huangdi, the high god Huang, and the Laozi. The followers of this school, they sort of worshipped and respected these two earlier historical figures, Huangdi and the Laozi. And these followers believe that to run a country, to govern people, the best way is to learn from nature. The best way is to learn from nature, like water, okay? See, water never has any strong opinion. He just goes wherever he can. He follows the terrain, okay? Follows the terrain. So the Huanglao followers believe that a good government or a good ruler should be just like that. A good ruler should not try to engineer the society based on his own vision or blueprint, because any human design of social engineering projects is almost doomed to fail. This is some very interesting wisdom we get from early Chinese Taoists. So they believe that the government should be small and government tax should be low, okay? Farmers' burden should be as light as possible, okay? The best government is just like the best shoes, okay? The best shoes are the shoes you cannot, when you use them and walk in them, you don't feel you're wearing them. So the best government should be just like that. Best government should be the government, the kind of shadow government that you don't feel they exist. That's the best government. That's the Huanglao school believes, okay? So very interesting political philosophy, all right? So that's how Taoism influenced political philosophy or theories. And then I also want to mention Zuangzi and the Art of Warfare, which we're going to read later. Taoism, especially Laozi, clearly had an influence on military technology, on military theories in early China. Remember when we talk about the Laozi, we talk about how there's a dialectical or paradoxical mode of thinking. Laozi claims that in order to expand something, you first need to shrink it. In order to take, you first have to give. We give some examples when we talk about the passage, remember? Yeah, we talked about how in order to be a profitable businessman, to run business, sometimes you want to give your customers some promotion, some cashback, some rewards in order for them to come over. So you first have to give something to take more money from them. Does it make sense? Right? And also in a romantic relationship, people often play hard to get. You actually want him, okay? But you play hard to get to show that your value is high, to sort of stimulate his interest in you. So if you don't play hard to get, maybe he will sort of devalue you in this romantic relationship. You know, in human competition or in any rivaling competitive relationships, doing the opposite a lot of times is the most efficient way to get what you want. Okay, so the military strategists like Zuangzi, the author of Art of Warfare, he learned a lot from this. He believed that you never want to show your enemy what you're going to do next. You always try to hide your true intention. You always hide your plan. And even better, you try to confuse your enemy with a misleading plan or signal. You try to you want to let your enemy or rivals to think you're doing one thing, but you're gonna do another. And I mean, this is the key to East Asian military theory. That is always attack your rival with a surprise. And this, of course, turned out to be a very useful strategy in any competitive human relations, including sports, right? In sports, you can always do this, right? In business competition, you can always do this, right? And also in battlefield, right? You never let your rival know what you're really gonna do, but instead you confuse them with the wrong understanding of what you're gonna do. So this is also something the later Chinese military strategists learned from Taoism, okay? And the last thing I want to mention is that Yang, remember the guy, the philosophy of self, the philosopher for myself, he may have also learned something from Lao Tzu. Some scholars argue, at least. Okay. All right. So that's a general development of Taoism. Now let's move on to Zhuangzi. Okay, so Zhuangzi. Yeah, I chose this cartoon image of Zhuangzi, the turtle in the mud. Zhuangzi. Yeah, in one of the passages of the Zhuangzi, the text. One day, Zhuangzi was invited by the king of Chu to serve in his court, perhaps as a high official. So the king of Chu sent someone for Zhuangzi to invite him to his court. But Zhuangzi says, I heard that there is a huge turtle shell preserved in the court as a sort of legendary divinity tool. Zhuangzi asked the representative of the true king. He says, thinking about the big turtle, although his turtle shell is respected, honored, and in the king's court. Okay, everybody thought this is a great, very important object for divinity. But from the perspective of the turtle, do you think he would like to have his turtle shell honored in the court, or as a real turtle just playing, rolling in the mud? The representative said, of course, the turtle wants to live in the mud as a live turtle. Zhuangzi said, that's my choice. I would rather to live like turtle in the mud rather than a dead turtle shell honored in your king's court. So that's Zhuangzi's answer. So he had a chance to serve in the government, but he refused to. So we're gonna move on to his theory. One of the most important chapters of Zhuangzi is that it's called equalizing things. Zhuangzi believes that all these differentiation, good or bad, black and white, long and short, all these perhaps are our misconceptions. Okay, they may be useful for you to live in the world, but they're fundamentally misconceptions. Okay, so he suggests that maybe a better way to live your life, or maybe more spontaneous way to live a life, is not to differentiate all these binaries. Okay, well, if I think about that, there's some kind of wisdom in this kind of a philosophy, right? Because we know that our human mind does not really belong to us. If you think about that, right? What if I tell you, everybody close your eyes and do not think of a polar bear? What's the first thing you think in your mind? Okay. What if I tell you, close your eyes and do not think of a green polar bear? What would you think of? The first thing you think of is a green polar bear, right? So that means our mind. So this small experiment shows that our mind doesn't really belong to us totally. It has its own logic. Our psychology works with its own logic. And of course, modern psychologists and scientists have been telling us that the way our brain works is a result of millions of years of evolution. And the purpose of evolution, if evolution has any purpose, okay, if it has any purpose, we know that evolution is actually aimless. It only fits, environments, right? Genetic diversity makes sure that there are different kinds of, individuals in a species, and then nature selects. So evolution actually has no direction. But if evolution has any direction, that is the passing on of our gene. Our physical body and our mentality has been designed through evolution for our gene to pass on. Okay, this is why when we're hungry, we want to eat. When we're sexually mature, we want to have sex. When we live in a society, we want higher social status, power, and wealth. We want a recognition, we want a respect, because all these things will help us to pass on our gene. But it doesn't mean that our mind really belongs to us. Okay, so evolutionary psychology have telling us that your mind is designed to pass on your gene. Okay, it doesn't necessarily really work for you if your consciousness really exists. Okay, so that said, a lot of times our brain will have a misconception because that saves energy. Yeah, we don't have time, but we can do, if you're interested, we can do all kinds of experiments to show that how misconceptions are a very, very integral part of how our mind works. And it's true for everybody. The reason for that is because our mind is designed to pass on gene in the most energy-saving way and most time-saving way. So we do a lot of fast thinking, to handle the challenges in our lives. So all these, most of the time, our mind can handle the situation very well, but sometimes it can have a lot of misconceptions. Okay, and for example, all these binaries, conceptual binaries, right and wrong, black and white, high and low, long and short, okay, soft and hard. All these concepts are what we imagine or project to the outside world to make sense of them, okay? So Zhuangzi is saying, maybe these misconceptions don't have to be there, okay? Maybe we should get away from this human-centered, subjective way of understanding the world. Just question yourself, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe long and short, these are not that absolute. Right and wrong, these are not that absolute. Okay, so in this case, Zhuangzi is following Laozi in criticizing human culture, because human culture is all about this ancient body of knowledge, right, passed on from antiquity. Confucian scholars would take them as almost absolute, or at least as very, very important, vital to human society. But Zhuangzi is saying, not necessarily. Zhuangzi sometimes, he gave me this impression that he argues that maybe living like a hunter-gatherer without human civilization is the way to go. Without a city, without language, without written language, without a received culture, without government. And the people just live the way like a hunter-gatherer. When you're hungry, you hunt. When you're tired, you take a rest. When thirsty, you drink water. Just that simple. Very spontaneous. It was spontaneous, very natural way of living life. So in other words, all these Taoists, they're very suspicious of the role of government. Okay. So this is how Zhuangzi argues that the kind of life you maybe should think of living. And Zhuangzi believes that the world is full of paradox. Okay, he believed that common sense quite often leads you to paradox. For example, everybody think to be useful is great. I want to be useful. Okay, useful means that I'm recognized by the society. But Zhuangzi says, how about in the time of warfare? In the time of warfare, a useful person in the society is going to be drafted into the army and fight in the battlefield and get killed. Okay, and very likely you're going to get killed. But in that case, maybe a disabled person, a useless person, ironically, can survive. So this shows that, a lot of times our commonsensical understanding of what is good and what is bad may not work all the time. Okay, the world is far more complicated than human reason or human mind can understand, right? So in the text of Zhuangzi would give all these lessons about that. Yeah. And then Zhuangzi is also questioning the validity of logic and language. One example we have raised when we talk about Laozi is that Zhuangzi argues that it's pointless for humans to have any verbal communication. Communications are fruitless, are totally useless. Because first, how do we know that what we're thinking is really what we're speaking? We don't know. More often than not, there's a gap between what we're thinking and what we're speaking. Because when we're speaking, we're actually slaves of the language we use. Yeah. The language itself, the inner logic of language itself conditions the way we speak. And a lot of times what we speak is not necessarily what we think. So that's the first problem. And then when we speak to someone else, how do we know that what we're speaking is really understood by the other person? We don't know. Human mind, again, is designed in a way that to save energy. So a lot of times we only want to see what we want. We only see what we want to see, and we only hear what we want to hear. Okay. A lot of times when people are talking to us, our mind, I mean, for our own sake, would totally distort the message. And we will only hear what we want to hear. So in this case, communication, interpersonal communication is a joke. Okay. Zhuangzi argues that we will never actually really faithfully pass on the information we want to pass on to the other party. And then third, even if the message is faithfully passed on, both of you, you and your partner of conversation both agreed upon something or disagreed upon something, does it mean that both of you are right? If you agree upon something, does it mean both of you are right? Zhuangzi says no. Okay. If you agree upon something, it could be just that both of you have false understanding of the world. Okay? So this makes language entirely untrustworthy. Okay? So we should abandon language. That's Zhuangzi says. Okay? The real wisdom is communicated not through language, but through something else. Okay? Zhuangzi was not very clear about if it's not a language, then what is vehicle or medium through which a real message or experience can be passed on? Yeah, but later Buddhists, when Buddhism got introduced into China around 200, 300 AD, that's hundreds of years after Wu's period, the Chinese Buddhists, they try to further develop Buddhist thinking. And the later Buddhists, they found Zhuangzi. So although Zhuangzi is a Taoist, later he was considered as a Taoist sage, but a lot of later Buddhists actually learned a lot from Zhuangzi, especially those Buddhists that we call Zen Buddhists. A lot of later Zen masters, they learned from Zhuangzi. They drew a lot from Zhuangzi. And we know that Zhuangzi, this kind of teaching is absent in India. Original Buddhism is very different from later Zen Buddhism that was developed in China. So in other words, without Taoism, you would not see Zen Buddhism, okay? Zen Buddhism came into being in China during the Tang Dynasty. We're talking about the 7th, 8th century AD, okay? The later Zen Buddhists, when they read Zhuangzi, they realized that, hey, maybe this is what Buddha says, okay? Language is totally untrustworthy. So in other words, maybe reading sutra, reading Buddha's words is not a way to understand Buddha. Instead, we should have this wordless communication without words. Okay, so it falls into this very mysterious way of having religious enlightenment. So Zen Buddhists, they have a strong opinion against bookish tradition. They don't believe that reading more books will make you smarter. Some of them actually believe that the more knowledge you have, the farther away you're from wisdom. This is you may call it the anti-intellectual tradition in the Zen Buddhism, but it originates from Zhuangzi and early Taoism. Okay, we don't have too much time to talk about Zen Buddhism. If you're interested in that, we can talk about that later. Let's move on to another item. Zhuangzi, following this logic of Zhuangzi's critique, mistrust, and a questioning of all human culture, Zhuangzi is saying human artifice, anything made by humans is bad, okay? Because it's against nature. It's totally against nature. Zhuangzi may agree with the hunter-gatherer's life, the pre-civilization kind of a human condition. He may think that that's probably acceptable, but right after civilization was created, everything falls into a problem. For example, Zhuangzi says, hey, look at animals. Animals have their own natural life. Okay, they live happily, very happily. Okay, but humans, once they created a civilization, especially after the invention of agriculture, right, around 10,000 years ago, right, humans put a yoke on cows, and we lock up chickens. Okay, we treat all these animals very, very cruelly for our own, so that we can get a protein easily. This is totally against the nature of all these animals. Very cruel things humans do to all these animals. Okay, so Zhuangzi is not okay with that. Zhuangzi is not okay with that. He believes that humans is probably the most hypocritical thing in the whole world, that use their own culture to screw up everything. We're destroying nature. We're taking advantage of a mother nature. Okay, we're taking minerals, mines, all these natural resources from the earth without any limit, just for our own greed. And we treat other species, other animals really, really badly. Okay, and look at how many species that humans have destroyed in the world. We're totally destroying nature. Okay, so you may call Zhuangzi is a fundamentalist naturalist. Okay, he's to a certain degree, he's even an environmentalist, right? And he believes that the problem for all these environmental or all these problems in his world is because of human. Okay, he criticizes a human-centered philosophy or worldview. I'm sure a lot of modern people would agree with him. Okay. Okay, one more example of how Zhuangzi questions language. Okay, let me give you one more example. One day, Zhuangzi is hiking with his friend called Huizi. Both of them are standing on a bridge over a small creek in a mountain. Beautiful environment. And then Zhuangzi feels happy. Yeah, he is one feels happy in nature, just like a lot of people in Colorado. Okay, so Zhuangzi is happy. He says, "Hey, look at the fish! How happy they are!" So he pointed at the fish in the creek over the bridge, and then his friend said, "Wait a minute, you're not fish. How do you know fish are happy? How do you know? You cannot know. So your knowledge is wrong." And then Zhuangzi replied. He says, "But you're not me. How do you know I don't know fish are happy?" So they're having, Zhuangzi is having all this kind of conversation with his friends all day. Okay, philosophical conversation. So they're trying to question each other's foundation for knowledge. That basically they're questioning humans' cognitive capabilities. Can we really understand anything? Can we really know? Can we really test any knowledge? Right? Well, Zhuangzi's type of Taoists, they say, no, we cannot. Agnostic. Okay, they believe that there is a fundamental limit to human knowledge, and we cannot pretend to know that we know about human society, we know about nature, a natural world. We cannot pretend to know that we know about ourselves. Okay, so this is the philosophical foundation for Zhuangzi's critique of the human artifice. So anything human made is bad, including the yoke we put on cows, including the pen that we created for chicken to lock them up, in creating all these terrible technologies to take advantage of Mother Nature and other species. Okay, and he's also fundamentally against the technology. He doesn't believe that technology advancement will really make us happier. See, if I really ask you this question, we're surrounded by all these technological inventions, right? Every year, there's some new innovation coming out. Some novice came out every year. And the message is that you want to use all these new technologies in order to not to fall behind the progress of human civilization. Okay, we have this strong confidence in human progress. This progressive, I call it the progressivism. Progressivism believes that human society or civilization is always progressing. Okay, we are better than yesterday. We're better than history, and the future is even better. Okay, because of all the technological progress, technological innovations we're gonna make. But is that really true? Is that really true? Is there no limit for human progress? Okay. Well, think about the invention of a technology. Okay, for hunter-gatherers, let's say, when the first person invented bones and arrows, he may greatly increase the game he would get, right? He would get a lot of meat. Okay, but when everybody's used bones and arrows, and when people are moving on to a new continent, they're killing not just one mammoth at one time. With the new technology, they could have killed more than 100, 200, 500 mammoths at one time. And then in one generation, they could have killed all the mammoths in the continent. Think about that. That's exactly how mammoths went into extinction. And we have a lot of evidence to show that large animals in Americas, in Asia, and in Australia, they went into extinction exactly at the time when humans colonized that new continent. It's not a coincidence. It's not a coincidence. We use technology to destroy the nature and destroy other species in a speed surprising to everybody. And we're still doing that. We're still doing that. So all these technological advancements may or may not necessarily really bring us to happiness or more production. Yeah. If you think about how many ancient civilizations went into decline, or sometimes it totally disappeared. Think about that ancient Mayan civilization, or the civilization in the Easter Island. Okay, the Easter Island would be a perfect example. When humans or the Polynesians migrated to the island, very quickly, within like 100 or 200 years, they cut off all the trees. Okay, they exhausted all the natural resources there, and then they fight against each other constantly. Eventually, their civilization declined. So there's human confidence in progress sometimes is not justifiable. It's not justified. There is a limit to our progress. We could destroy the environments we rely on, and we could destroy ourselves with the kind of technology. This is why I think all these Hollywood movies like Matrix or Terminator, these are Taoist movies. They give you the same warning like a Taoist. They say, your technology could one day come back to get you, to destroy you, right? But think about the Matrix, right? Humans living all these capsules, right? Overruled by robots that created to work for us. Terminators. I mean, the movies tell exactly the same story, right? We one day the robots or technology we invented to work for us may enslave us in the future. So all these technological advancements, including computers, internet, or even today, like artificial intelligence, do they necessarily will make us happier? Or will they alienate us from our own nature? Okay, so Zuangzi is posing this very fundamental question about the technology, about the progress, Yeah, Zuangzi certainly believe that technology will make us happier. Yeah, sometimes back to the paradoxical nature of the world or ironical nature of the world. The more sophisticated the technology you rely on, more sophisticated it is, the easier it will go bad. For example, if you put cell phones, think about cell phone. Nowadays, cell phone can do almost everything for us, right? From calendar, booking hotel, communicating, store of information, everything. So we put everything into our cell phone. But what if you lose your cell phone? What if you lose your cell phone? You lose your own identity. You lose almost everything in your life. In that case, perhaps the cell phone is not as good as a notepad and a pencil, which you can just write down things in a very primitive way. Okay, so Zuangzi is saying no. Technology maybe is a really dangerous thing. we should perhaps get away from that. Okay, so we're using out our 1 hour time for lecture, so I'm gonna be quick for the next. So then the question is, Zhuangzi is against all these civilization, language, technology, artifice, any human products, institutions. Then how do we live our life? The Zhuangzi is saying you can still live a life, but an ideal life is as close as the one to a hunter-gatherer's life, in which you don't have a lot of knowledge. Ignorant is good, because you don't need to know that many things. I mean, think about that. I mean, today, if you turn on your computer, turn on your cell phone, you're bombarded by all this information, all kinds of information. But the question is, do you read the information? I mean, all these social platforms, they're designed to get your attention, right? So you can easily kill 2 hours, 3 hours by watching junk videos on YouTube, but does it really give you happiness? Are you really happier? Are you really happier, with all these, novice based on technology, right? So John's saying, get away from them. Put down your cell phone. I mean, I'm sure John's, of course, John's doesn't know cell phone, but if John's lived in today's world, that's the message, definitely the message he would tell you. He would tell you that shut down your computer, turn off your cell phone, go to nature, okay? Go to nature and really discover the innate beauty of nature rather than immersing yourself into all these technology that constantly try to get your attention and try to stimulate your hormones like the dopamine, right? Yeah, so get away from all these things. Maybe you can find your true self and live a spontaneous life. Get away from all these human ambitions imposed on you from other institutions. Okay, live a life without differentiation. Simply enjoy the innate happiness of your life. So in other words, so Zen Buddhism, in my opinion, very well explains Zhuangzi's ideal lifestyle. That is mindfulness. Mindfulness, okay? Well, Zhuangzi didn't say mindfulness specifically, but certainly his teachings is totally compatible with the later Zen Buddhism. And Zen Buddhism, I mean, as most scholars argue, has been heavily influenced by Zhuangzi's philosophy. That is, live a life as spontaneous as possible. Okay? Do not, sometimes this involves not making too much efforts, actually. The ideal life is a life effortless. If you feel you have to really strive to meet some standards, that's definitely not natural. That's not the life Zhuangzi wants you to live. Instead, he wants you to really be spontaneous, be natural, and live a effortless kind of life. In that case, you're gonna have to rethink about what is important to you, and really focus on the here and now. Focus on the here and now. Okay. For example, when you eat, just calm down and feel the sweetness of the veggies, without thinking of anything else. Do not think of the party you had last night. Do not think about the movies you're gonna watch tomorrow. Do not think of the homework. Do not think of anything else. Just focus on one thing at a time. Okay, when you eat, just taste the sweetness of veggies. When you sleep, just to calm yourself down and enjoy the rest. Okay, of course, when you study, just try to focus. That would make things a lot easier. Okay, actually, I always tell my children, if you're in a difficult lecture, you have problem following up, it's difficult to understand, it takes a lot of energy to really focus. In that case, actually, the more focused you are, the less torture it will feel. Trust me, yeah, next time try that. When you do a very difficult task, instead of, doing it half-heartedly and is thinking of something else, try to finish up and rushing through, instead of doing that, just focus on one thing at a time. Be mindful of what you're doing, okay? Focus on the details of the job. Really manage your attention, okay? Things will become not so much as a torture. Actually, it would be more efficient, far more efficient and effortless if you really focus. because you easily get into this mind flow or mind flow state, which is most productive and efficient, and it feels good. It feels good. Yeah, the difficult task will not be a torture anymore. So in other words, live this kind of a Zhuangzi type of spontaneous lifestyle and be mindful of every little things you do in your life will bring you closer perhaps to nature, including your human nature, okay? In this case, nature and human nature, they're the same thing in Zhuangzi's eyes, okay? So next time try that. This is how we not differentiate things. Okay, this is what my interpretation of Zhuangzi's idea of a non-differentiation. You detach yourself from your own personal feelings because when you do things, because our personal feelings, conceptions a lot of times are wrong. Just like language is wrong all the time. So detachment from the thing you're doing is crucial to get this enlightenment. So this is how Zhuangzi suggests that we solve the problem of our life. I mean, I don't promise that it will definitely solve your problem, but it's something, an alternative way of living your life that is worth thinking about. Okay. Yeah. The last thing is yin and yang. This actually in Zhuangzi, the text. This is the first text. One of the first texts we saw the concept of the yin and yang. From ancient Chinese philosophical tradition. So that said, a lot of people know the concept of yin and yang. We know this is a relative binary concept, right? And keep in mind that this is a little bit different from absolute binaries, right? Absolute binaries mean that there's absolute good and bad, black and white, tall and short. But Chinese concept of yin and yang, they constantly transform into each other. Okay, so that means what is yin and what is yang are relative to each other. For example, say I as a person, as a husband, I'm yang, my wife is a yin, but I'm also a son. So when I face my father, I'm yin and my father is yang. So the yin and yang are constantly transforming into each other like day and night, right? We know that there's no absolute date. What is day will very quickly transform into night, and what is night will quickly transform into night. So same is true for any binary concepts, you know, good and bad, lucky and unlucky, fortune, misfortune, you know, short and long. You can use this, you know, this fluid concept of binaries into any pairs of concepts. So nothing is absolute. So in that case, you may call Zhuangzi is a relativist, but he's an absolute relativist. Okay, so this is something the concept I invented, an absolutist relativist. He is a relativist in every aspect of his life, and that's kind of difficult, actually, very difficult. All right, any questions about Zhuangzi? I know, you know, sometimes this is kind of a Taoist philosophy is hard to understand, but just try your best. Actually, you know what? From a Taoist perspective, you should not try. You should not try. Once you strive to do something, try very hard to do something, you're wrong. Okay? So Zhuangzi is saying the best way is to get into mind flow. When you're totally immersed into the constant flow of doing something. You know, has there anyone, you know, been in the state of mind flow? When you're totally immersed into something and you totally forget about time. You totally forget about anything else. You know, I sometimes I can get into that state when for example, when I was drawing as a little kid, when I was playing music, I totally absorbed into the thing I'm engaging in. I forget about time. I forget about efforts because I'm not making any efforts. I forget about the techniques, right? When I play guitar, the best way for me to play guitar is that you forget about all these technical requirements. You just enjoy the music. You flow with the music. Okay, so according to Zhuangzi, the best way to produce art, which is the same thing as the way to live your life. Okay, you know, art and life for Zhuangzi, same thing. Is the same thing. Your life is a piece of art. Your best piece of art. that you should create. And when you create the best piece of art, you should forget about all the technical aspects. You should flow with the notes or with the brushes, the expression of the brushes, right? And according to Zhuangzi, that's the best way for you to really produce something good, including your life. Okay, so if we apply this kind of lifestyle into, say, your learning in this class, that would mean when you're writing a paper for Professor Wei, you should forget about all these rubric criteria, all these results. You should stop worrying about, am I going to be getting an A from Professor Wei? Okay, you should forget about that. Okay, instead, you should really focus on the content itself. Be mindful of the content itself, and then try to express yourself through the writing in the way that's so spontaneous that you forget about time. You forget about what class you're writing this paper for. That's the best way to write a paper, according to Zhuangzi. Okay, we should stop here. Let's have a, okay, any questions? Any questions about Zhuangzi? Any questions? Okay, if no questions, then we will come back at 6:05. Okay, I will see you at 6:05 in the discussion. See you in a bit.